Hello, everybody. Today's first review is going to be of a movie called The Bikeriders. So I'm just going through my list in as good an order as I can now. Sometimes I might go off the beaten path, but I'm trying to follow it page for page so I can just kind of actually get through it and then move along with it. Because, yeah, I just keep adding stuff to it. So um, the more I add and the more I go back and forth, the harder it is to actually follow. So now I'm just going to try to go through it movie for movie if I can. Now, sometimes I might not be able to watch the movie because it's not free anywhere, so some of them I might have to end up buying, so it might take me some time to get through those ones. But today we're going to be doing the Bikeriders, which I gave a 7 out of 10 to, and I always stick with my ratings when I go and see the movie. I think I might have changed one in the past, and maybe it just was because I wasn't feeling that. I can't remember what movie it was now that I've done that with, but I'm pretty sure that was one that I actually ended up giving a higher rating to the second time I watched it through. And maybe it's just because when you watch it alone, you can kind of focus on certain things a little bit more than when you're out with friends and stuff at the theater. But yeah, for this one, my rating stays the same. So we will go over the cast list because there was a big cast in this movie, but I just kind of wrote down like the main like standout characters, or at least what I thought were the standout characters anyway. So Austin Butler, who played Benny, Jodie Comer, who played Kathy, Tom Hardy, who played Johnny, Michael Shannon, who played Zipko, Mike Faist, who played Danny, who was like the interviewer slash cameraman, sort of uh, basically the person who was writing and filming and kind of following the life of these bikers, right? And he ended up writing a book about them, so it's kind of cool. Like, this movie was loosely based on like a true story. Boyd Hoy, sorry, Boyd Holbrook, who played Cal, Damon Harriman, who played Brucey, Toby Wallace, who played the kid, and then Norman Reedus, who played Funny Sonny. So there was for the movie that it was, there was quite a cast, or at least some pretty big actors. Now I feel like Austin Butler has kind of like he did like his big thing there with like Elvis and then a few other movies, and then I haven't really seen him in anything recently. Um, so yeah, I'm wondering if he's working on some other big products that we're just kind of waiting for, and we'll see. But yeah, so I guess the story takes place from between 1965 and 1973, or I guess from 1965 to 1973 would be better said. So a photographer documented the Midwest Motorcycle Club. So this film was inspired by his book, I guess. So the first interview was Kathy in 1965, of course, when she's like first kind of, I guess, introduced to the club, I suppose, just from mutual friends. And she kind of like says that she was like scared for her life, sort of thing, because she'd never been really introduced to that scene. But then she sees Benny and kind of like immediately falls in love, and of course ends up spending like most of the night at the club, right? And of course Johnny says, um, Johnny's kind of connected with Benny, I guess, at that point a little bit too. But obviously their bond grows more throughout the film. But he is the leader of the club, right? And he says, that um, she'll be protected. Like nothing bad will ever happen to her as long as she's with them, right? And I think he keeps that promise throughout the movie, I would say. So she like kind of pokes fun at the fact that she gets into a lot more trouble once she meets Benny. Because Benny is kind of like a, oh my god, I can't hang on to this book today for some reason. Because Benny is kind of like a bit of a loose cannon, I guess, and he's kind of a bit of a fighter. And no matter what, he will not remove his colors. It doesn't matter whether he's traveling with a group or alone. He will not, back down from anything, right? So I guess the club actually started as a racing club, and Johnny got the idea from watching a movie, lo and behold, about a motorcycle club. And then he kind of decides, I'm going to start my own sort of thing, like that would be cool. And I don't think he thought it was ever going to get as big as it was. He just wanted to kind of do it for fun, so they could have, like him and his buddies could have like a thing that they all kind of get together and do. other than just the racing. Like, they can just kind of sit down and chat, have some drinks, have a good time, sort of thing. Which, I mean, was probably what most bike clubs started out as anyway, right? But then, of course, you get a whole bunch of people wanting to join, and then things get out of hand, and yeah, obviously, some people want to do more than what you're doing, and yeah, things just get messy when you add too much into it, right? Which brings me to my next point, was that somebody ends up challenging Johnny based on the fact that they don't agree with him. They want to start a, what is that, new chapter. Now, of course, Johnny says no, and then they end up fighting about it, and Johnny says, um, yeah, you can have your chapter, but the one guy says to him, Brucey says to him, like, why would you even bother doing that, going through all that just to end up giving him his own chapter anyway? And Johnny says, well, now he knows that everything has to come through me, sort of thing. Like, everybody will know that at this point. So, smart of him to do, but also I don't think, from what I've seen in biker shows anyway, expanding the club doesn't ever seem to be a good thing. It ends up just leading to more complexities down the road, right? So, of course, they go back to Benny with that fight at the bar where he won't take off his colors, and I guess he almost lost his foot in that fight, which is kind of crazy. And then we go to Kathy's interview in 1973. So this was like, so she's kind of telling the story at the beginning, and then she's very well telling the story at the end, I guess, sort of thing, about how Johnny slowly started to go a little bit crazy. And I think it mainly was because, right, there's so many chapters popping up that he can't keep control of everything now. And he has these younger kids want to join in, and he turns them away, of course. Now, I can't remember exactly when Sonny showed up, but I think he had showed up because of Cal. I guess Cal was with them at one point, and he had heard that he was flying new colors, I guess, and didn't hand in his old ones, and he was here to, I guess, beat him up. Now, I'm not sure if that was true or that was just a joke in the movie, but yeah, it seemed like he was serious, but then he kind of, I guess, got along with that whole group, so he said, he wanted to ride with them for a while, even though he was part of another club, and that's what ended up happening. So it was kind of funny to see all that go down. Now, where was I? So, of course, after Benny gets into his fight, Johnny goes to the bar and gets the names of the men that had beat up Benny. Now, I don't think they ever show what they did to them, but I'm assuming it wasn't good. And then they burned down the bar, of course, that Benny got beat up at. So eventually it gets to the point where, Kathy is really getting concerned for Benny because Benny doesn't seem to have, like, any, like, stopping what he's doing sort of thing. Like, he seems to really like the outlaw life, even though he keeps constantly, for some reason, talking about leaving, just, like, getting up and leaving. And, even though he's still going to be riding, I think he just wanted to get away from all the drama, considering the fact that, the club's sort of splitting at this point, I guess, and so on and so forth, right? So Kathy does ask Johnny to kick Benny out of the club. Of course, Johnny loves Benny, and they've kind of bonded at this point a little bit too much, and Johnny kind of needs Benny there as, I guess, maybe like a second in command sort of thing. And of course, eventually gets to the point where Johnny asks Benny to take over the club when he steps down, but of course, Benny says no. Like, it'll never be him. Like, he doesn't want all that responsibility. He just wants to be able to ride and kind of live free, right? So eventually, which leads us to Brucey passing away, unfortunately, due to a car accident. It didn't look that severe in the movie, but I'm sure it probably, maybe they dulled it down a little bit for the movie, I think. Because they didn't really show much. They just kind of showed, like, the car pulling into the driveway, and then, you kind of get the idea that Brucey hit it at probably a pretty intense speed anyway. So, yeah, he passes away. And then, yeah, the younger crew called the Renegades asked Johnny to join. And, of course, he says, yes, like specifically to this kid that, he can, but he has to leave all his friends behind. And of course, I think Johnny got what he wanted out of that because the kid says, yeah, no, like, no problem. I'll leave all my friends behind and join your crew. And Johnny says, turn away now, like, get out of here, sort of thing. Because you can tell that if he's willing to do that to his friends that quickly, that somebody that he knows he will easily betray because there's no loyalty to this kid. He just wants to be part of whatever is the strongest, right? Now, eventually, this kid does end up becoming part of another chapter of the Vandals and then does challenge Johnny. And of course, Johnny goes with his regular rules, the whole knives or fists thing. But unfortunately, this kid is a little smarter than that and just shows up at the parking lot and shoots him and takes over the club. And of course, it starts to grow, it gets bigger. Now, eventually, there were other biker crews that probably took over, and eventually the Vandals were no more, or I guess whatever the bike club was that I said at the very beginning. So yeah, so Benny, of course, eventually gets the news that Johnny has passed away and returns home. And then, of course, Kathy says at the very end of the movie that her and Benny have moved to Florida. And after Johnny's passing, Benny no longer rides. And then you hear the motorcycles. Well, actually, she says that he no longer rides and he works for his cousin. They're happy, they're living a life. No more drama, I guess, now that they're out in Florida. But then all of a sudden you hear like the bikes ride up close to Benny's house and you see like a little smirk go across his face. So I personally think that meant that he was running his own club. That's just the feeling I get from that. So I think, yeah, there's obviously a little bit more to the story probably than that, and I guess maybe we'll never know. Just because of obviously the Vandals kind of going their own way, and then of course maybe Benny decided that he was going to start his own chapter out in Florida, and that's just kind of the feeling I get from the very end of that movie with the smiles back and forth between the two of them. So a very cool ending, but yeah, I would say that the pacing of this movie was kind of a little bit too slow for me. Although I enjoyed the movie, like seeing it twice, I did enjoy it. But yeah, it was kind of like a mid-tier movie for me, and that's why I ended up giving it a 7 out of 10, just because the pacing was slow, and yeah, I almost think that this movie could have been like probably cut a little bit shorter, but it is what it is. It was like an almost 2 hour runtime for um, a fairly short story that they just kind of, I feel like, kind of spread out a little bit too much, and then it kind of took away from you know what they were trying to get across, like this whole like outlaw biker gang thing. But yeah, I mean, I guess maybe there was even more to tell at the end. So who knows? This movie could have ended up, I guess, potentially being even longer, if they went into maybe a little bit more detail about what had happened there at the end. But I think they wanted to kind of leave it on a cliffhanger. So yeah. But anyway, that's all I can say about this movie. I think I've kind of rambled on long enough, but there obviously were some laughs and some pretty intense moments throughout this movie. But yeah, 7 out of 10. And I guess I will see you guys in the next review. Bye bye for now.